let's go ahead and jump in. So before I start sharing my screen, wanted to let you all know my name is Julie Williams. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm licensed in the state of California as well as via video telehealth in Idaho. And I appreciate you all being here, and I'm looking forward to us spending time together. How I had structured today is there will be different exercises. One of the best ways that I find working with people is experiential. So instead of only talking about stuff, I want us to practice and do some things. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Perfect. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that, and hopefully I'm still here as well, or I know you can change your view. So what we'll be talking about today is stress management through mindful self-compassion. The biggest things, let me click through here. My information is there. So one of the most helpful pieces I went to start with was what exactly is stress, because there's so many different definitions. So if you take a minute and think about in your body, in your nervous system, what is stress? So maybe just taking a minute to think about that. Maybe you're currently bringing in stress, which is part of why you're here. And if that's the case, maybe it wouldn't be that hard to kind of pull into that bodily felt sense. So just taking a minute of what does stress feel like in your body and what do you notice? So having a good idea of that, what I gave you here is the WHO definition, the World Health Organization's definition: state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. One of the most important pieces in there is stress is natural human response. We all experience stress. Really, what we find in the psych research is how we respond to it makes the big difference. So that's part of what we'll be talking about today, is what's something that you're able to do differently. You may not be able to avoid stress completely, and how can you respond differently? And we tend to view stress pretty negatively, but there can be beneficial parts of it. Yesterday was tax day here in the US, April 15th. So we need a little bit of stress to get us going. I doubt many of us would have paid our taxes right at that deadline or asked for an extension if we hadn't had that deadline. So really, think of it like a bell curve, that we need enough stress to get going, but not so much that we're at the top that we're overwhelmed. So these may be things that you've all thought about when I said, what do you notice in your body? So what are some of the physical impacts? What are some of the mental impacts? For me, as a licensed marriage family therapist, I get people coming often and I hear trouble sleeping, or sleeping so much they're so exhausted, or sleeping a lot and not feeling rested is something I hear. Stomach issues, I specialize in anxiety. And so people will come with, hey, my stomach hurts a lot, or I'm not hungry, or I'm using food to cope, I'm eating a lot and I'm not maybe necessarily enjoying it. So often our digestion system can be complicated by stress. Other people will share with me, even just relaxing is hard. Like maybe I'm sitting there on the couch, but my mind is racing. I'm having all these different thoughts and feelings. And it's really hard to even relax. One piece that often I hear too, which they kind of all relate together, is a lot of folks, when they're feeling overwhelmed, things may feel really big. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, how do I solve this problem? You sleep overnight, you wake up and you're like, oh, here's some clarity. My brain, my body has had some time to step away from this situation. The physical impacts, obviously, all of those, in addition to sometimes people use alcohol, tobacco, or drug use as a way of cope. And so kind of finding other ways in addition to some of these challenges. And that's part of what we'll talk about today. There's an important difference between acute stress or something that's more time limited. So, like obviously a job interview, or if you're, maybe not a big fan of flying or like getting to the airport on time, those are much more acute, time limited versus chronic. And often where we see the challenges and the impacts of chronic stress is often where a lot of that lies, is kind of that ongoing. So through mindful self-compassion, we'll talk about what are other ways that you can respond. So another way that I would appreciate if you all took a minute to think is, how do you respond to stress? So maybe make a list either on your notes app or on a piece of paper. Think about currently, what are some of the ways that you respond to stress? I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Think about that. So, thinking about that, what do you notice are some of the helpful ways that you respond? If you were to kind of look at your list, everything's all together. If you were pull out, okay, these are some of the ways that are maybe helpful or healthy. Think about what those are. There's some of the examples that I have here. Things like exercise, calling a friend, meditating, taking a break, whether that's a break in your workday, getting up, moving around, whether that's taking a vacation or not working on weekends, kind of having more of a work-life balance in that way. Maybe what are some lists on some of the aspects of your list that are less helpful? Maybe ones you want to change or reduce or do differently. So some of the examples I have here: substance misuse, self-criticism, beating yourself up. Why can't I just do that? Other people can. Other people don't seem bothered by this. A big one I see often in my practice is isolating. So the example previously was calling a friend or a family member reaching out. So some people go, oof, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't want to kind of have somebody else's experience. So isolating. We'll talk about how aspects of mindful self compassion may be counter to that. Also, maybe feeling sorry for yourself, feeling like this is the worst thing and this feels so overwhelming. What we find for aspects of stress management that are less helpful is often they avoid or distract. So if you think about substance use, for example, that's a way of checking out. That's a way of mentally and physically, I'm going to change my body. I'm not going to think about this. I'm going to maybe soften the edges. And so that's a way of avoiding emotions when used as a stress response. Um, a lot of people also, I didn't include this actually, but a lot of people will talk about like doom scrolling or mindless scrolling, either on their phone or jumping into TV or video games, things that they're like, I just can't think about this. I'm going to distract or avoid. So thinking about if you were to have your list kind of in two sections, if you think about it that way, is for the ways that maybe are a bit more helpful. How do you feel after those? So with exercise, do you feel tired? Just a great one if you're having trouble sleeping. Let's get your endorphins, get your body worn out. So you feel a little more tired. Calling a friend, maybe you feel more connected or supported. Meditating, maybe you feel a little calmer, a little more clear-headed. Maybe you don't have a solution, but at least your nervous system isn't ramped up to a 10. Taking a break. They say one of the best things is to take a break, even a quick 5-minute break. So sometimes people notice that being really helpful. One aspect that I have an exercise on later that we'll talk about is, what are your values? So how do you want to show up in the world? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? And often people will look at the helpful stress responses and say, okay, that feels a bit more values aligned. Let's say health, for example, and the example of exercise. So if you have a value of health, exercise may be along those lines, assuming you're using it appropriately, not excessively, and not in kind of a self-blaming way. So often people will find, hey, when I have these more helpful ways of responding to stress, this feels more values aligned. So thinking about some of the less helpful ways, maybe let's say tobacco use, for example, maybe that's not as aligned if your goal is health related. And so, or your value is related to health. So thinking about also weaving in values, what kind of life do you want to live? And are your stress management techniques along the lines of, hey, this is how I want to show up in the world. One thing I didn't point out earlier that also is important to name with stress is how does it affect us in our relationships? So a lot of times if people are very frustrated or feeling impatient, that may be one way that that shows up in our relationships. So maybe we're a little more irritable with loved ones. Maybe we're a little more testy with coworkers. Maybe we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. So if you think about what are your values related to work, or sorry, relationships, how does that land? So what I'm proposing is what if we were to name it? Name the experience, name the stress. And stress could be any big emotion. You could, you know, change that word if that word's not helpful for you. Sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, overwhelm. What would it be like to name it rather than avoid it or distract from it? So here are some just general pieces that are helpful to think about. This also comes from the WHO website, which is in the references later. Um, grounding, deep breathing, self-compassion is one way. Making sure you get enough sleep. We know there's a lot of research out there on sleep. And when we tend to be chronically sleep deprived, that makes that harder for us to recover. We tend to, notice more that irritability, concentration, um, daily routine. That can give us a sense of control or power. That also gives us something to look forward to. Social support, healthy eating, and especially, a lot of the folks I work with really notice and have taken a step back from social media, just finding that piece kind of hard or that comparison. It is hard. I will put a caveat for those that have social media as an aspect of work. And so for some people, they then have to limit that time and say, okay, this is within my work time for social media versus, this is my fun time and also the news. So the whole idea of mindful self-compassion is how can we sit with rather than run away from? One of my favorite analogies in my work is emotions are like children in the car. We're not minor children who can't drive. We are not going to let them drive because it's not safe. They also might be pretty impulsive, want to go through the McDonald's drive-through all the time. But we also don't shove the children in the trunk. And so having that balance of how do we have our emotions here, listen to the message, they're in the back seat, but they're not driving and they're not shoved in the trunk. So we'll jump into an exercise here shortly, but I wanted to give you an overview of what mindful self-compassion is since I keep using this term. So I would recommend if you're interested in this topic, going to check out Dr. Neff's website, self-compassion.org. In it, she has some really great resources and different exercises. So the first part is talking about the three main components of what it actually is. So the first is compassion, kindness, and that is contrasted with judgment. So I have a lot of folks who come to me with very critical thoughts. They may beat themselves up, they may have perfectionism, or they may have imposter syndrome, all these different pieces. And really, we're looking for that to create that skill of warmth in response. Instead of beating yourself up, it only adds layers to the situation. How can you be warm and supportive So one analogy that Dr. Neff uses often is the idea of a coach. Like, hey, you can do this. I believe in you. You got this. You know, I'm here with you versus the drill sergeant. The drill sergeant's going to beat you up, tear you down, versus like, hey, we can do this. I'm here. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. So really noticing and naming everyone has pain. Suffering is a part of life. These aspects aren't, unique to us. Maybe our exact circumstances and context is unique, but everyone's having that. Everyone, when I say stress, that's pretty universal. Most people go, oof, yeah, I feel it in my shoulders. Or, oh, yeah, I feel it in my stomach or my chest. So really the idea of like leaning into that versus isolating, we talked about the helpful versus unhelpful ways of responding. The third component, which may not be quite as familiar, is the idea of mindfulness versus over-identification. So one helpful piece to come back to is how would I treat a friend? If a friend was coming to me with this experience, would I blame them? Would I shame them? Would I beat themselves up? Would I should all of them? You should have. Why didn't you? How would I treat a friend? Probably be hopefully calm and kind and thoughtful. Hopefully not a ton of advice giving unless they asked for it. But I wouldn't beat themselves up the way I beat myself up. Versus if we're really over identified with our thoughts and feelings, it's hard for us to take that perspective. We're so in it. I think of like living life like this, like we're so in it, we can't see past it. So mindfulness is the ability to kind of take a step back from us. So what I will have you all do is you can write, this is a section of the mindful self-compassion quiz that Dr. Neff has on our website. You can rate yourself from a 1 to 5 on the scale. 1 is almost never, so it doesn't really apply. 2 is occasionally. 3 is about half the time. 4 is fairly often, and 5 is almost always. So the first question is 1, I'm disapproving and judgmental about my own flaws and inadequacy. So what is that on a 1 to 5 for you? 2, when I'm feeling down, I tend to obsess and fixate on everything that's wrong. Oops, let me go back one. 3, when things are going badly for me, I see the difficulties as a part of life that everyone goes through. 4, when I think about my inadequacies, it tends to make me feel more separate and cut off from the rest of the world. 5, I try to be loving towards myself when I'm feeling emotional pain. So, as you noticed, probably some of these are inverse. So, number 1, self judgment, isolation. Number 4, over identification. Number 2. So, when those measures are inverse, so a higher score equals less compassion, lower score on the other ones equals more compassion. So, for example, I'm disapproving and judgmental. If that's higher, or that's inverse, that would be noting lower amounts of self compassion. So the reason I wanted to share that with you is having some idea of kind of how we note and measure self-compassion. The entire quiz is on Dr. Nutt's website. So if you're interested, I recommend you taking that. And that also gives you a helpful piece for some of the components and areas to grow. So since we've been talking about it, let's go ahead and do it. So what I'm going to have you do is we're going to do this self-compassion break. So go ahead and take a minute to find a comfortable seat. You need to wiggle or move around. We're going to start, and you're welcome to turn off camera if that's easier. So we're going to start of thinking of a situation in your life that is causing you stress, such as a health problem, a relationship problem, a work problem, or another struggle. Pick something in the mild to moderate range, not a big problem. Something I usually say on like a 3, 1 being no stress at all, 10 being very stressed, so something on a 3. Visualize the situation clearly in your mind's eye. What is the setting? Now try saying to yourself, noticing the discomfort in your body. Who is saying what to whom? What is happening? What might happen? See if you feel this discomfort in your body as you bring this difficulty to mind. Now try saying to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. That's noticing mindfulness. Perhaps other words speak to you more. This hurts. Ouch. This is stressful. Now try saying to yourself, suffering is a part of life. That's common humanity. Other options include, I'm not alone. Everyone experiences this just like me. This is how it feels when people struggle this way. Now offer yourself the gesture of a soothing touch. Perhaps hand on your chest or on your stomach. Perhaps a loving arm on your shoulder or your face. Find a soothing touch and try saying to yourself, may I be kind to myself, or may I give myself what I need. Perhaps there are particular words of kindness and support that you need to hear right now in this difficult situation. Some options may be, may I accept myself as I am? May I begin to accept myself? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? May I be patient? If you're having difficulty finding the right words, imagine that a dear friend or loved one is having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person? What simple message would you like to deliver to your friend, heart to heart? Now, as we bring our practice to a close and we move around, just think for a minute, what did you notice? Perhaps if you came in stressed and did this exercise instead of maybe some of those less helpful ways of showing up, maybe there'd be less avoidance. Or maybe you'd still do the activity that's less helpful, but it'd be delayed. So the next exercise we're going to look at, I mentioned earlier, values. Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world? So I want you to think about, or do you grab a piece of paper or in the notes app of your phone? Imagine it was your 80th birthday party. Just picture yourself there. Maybe that's a ways off. Maybe it's not a ways off for you. But what do you want people to say about you and how you lived your life? So taking a minute here to write out, what do you want people to say about you? So thinking about some of those qualities and the ways you lived your life. Does mindful self-compassion get you closer to that way of living or farther from? You think about maybe kindness, for example, maybe a value, maybe having more patience would be something you want people to describe as, oh, they were so kind. Oh, they always helped me out. Oh, I knew I could count on them. They were a great friend. They were supportive. And so often people find mindful self-compassion can also lead in terms of values, both how you live your life in response to stress and even without moments of stress. If that didn't quite resonate for you, and or if you want more, some people will think about what they want their eulogy to be after they pass away. Or what do you want on your tombstone? For some people, 80th doesn't feel quite existential enough. And so you can think about your eulogy. Other people appreciate the exercise, and some of you may have heard of this, the magic wand. You were to wake up tomorrow and didn't have this pain, this stress, this challenge, what would be different? How would you live your life? That might be another way to kind of look at the role of avoidance and stress in your life. One thing I always like to give a caveat around is that there may be aspects of your life, whether it's at work, relationships, living situation, friendships, family, any kind of different area, health, these different areas of your life. If you're not in a space to make the changes or reach the goals that you maybe have or haven't, maybe it feels too big to even set goals right now, there may be some elements of acceptance to say, okay, I know I want things to be different. Maybe I don't know what they want to be. Maybe I'm not ready to make those changes. For example, maybe you're in a relationship, you're not sure if you want to leave yet or not. Maybe the acceptance piece is, hey, I haven't made a choice. I don't know if I'm going to. I accept I have these big emotions that I'm not going to run away from. So acceptance may also come into that. Mindful self-compassion, a great way to have acceptance around that. Hey, I'm feeling these emotions. How do I want to respond to myself kindly? So we will have another experiential exercise now. So let me go ahead and jump into that. So what I'll have you do, then you can find a comfortable spot. If you need to move or wiggle around, feel free to do so. You can close your eyes or soften your gaze. Start by taking a few deep, relaxing breaths. If it's helpful, you can give a little sigh. Feel that. Place your hand over your heart or another soothing place, reminding yourself that you were in the room, perhaps allowing kindness to flow through your hand into your body. You're welcome to leave your hand there throughout this exercise or remove it. Recall a mild to moderate situation. Can be either the one you used, for example, earlier, a different one. Clearly visualize the situation, who is involved, what is happening. As you relive the situation, notice if any emotions arise within you. And if so, see if you can label an emotion. Perhaps there's anger, sadness, grief, confusion, fear, longing, despair. If you're having many emotions, see if you have a name for the strongest emotion associated. And repeat the emotion to yourself in a gentle, understanding voice, as if you were validating for a friend what she was feeling. That's longing, that's grief. Now expand your awareness to your body as a whole. Recall the difficult situation again. Scan your body for where you feel it the most easily. In your mind's eye, sweep your body head to toe, stopping where you sense a little tension or discomfort. Just feel what's feelable right now in your body. Nothing more. Now, if you can, choose a single location in your body where the feeling expresses itself most strongly. Perhaps as a point of muscle tension, a hollow feeling, or even a heartache. In your mind, gently incline toward that spot. Allow your awareness to fully inhabit the physical sensation of emotion in the body. Now soften into the location in your body where you feel the difficult emotion. Let the muscles soften. Let them relax as if in warm water. Soften, soften, soften. Remember that we're not trying to change the feeling, just hold it in a tender way. If you wish, just soften a little around the edges. Now soothe yourself because of the difficult situation. If you wish, place your hand over this part of your body that feels uncomfortable and just feel the gentle touch of your hand. Perhaps imagining warmth and kindness flowing through your hand into your body. And are there comforting words you might need to hear? If you had a friend struggling in the same way, what would you say to your friend? I'm so sorry you feel this way. I care deeply about you. Can you offer yourself a similar message? Oh, it's so hard to feel this way. May I be kind to myself? Finally, allow the discomfort to be there. Make room for it. Release the need to make it go away. Allow yourself to be just as you are, if only for this minute. If you wish, you can repeat the cycle with your emotion or your stress, going deeper each time, sticking with the sensation, if it moves in your body, or even morphs into a different emotion or sensation. Soften, soothe, allow. Soften, soothe, allow. Let go of the practice as a whole. Allow yourself to feel whatever you feel in this moment. Maybe just take a minute and think about what you noticed, what you learned in that exercise. That's taken from Dr. Neff's book, The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. She also has the Mindful Self-Compassion book. I like the workbook because it has exercises, it has room to write. She also has the audio links on her website, which I'll share in the resources. So as we wrap up, think about what is one thing from today you're willing to put into practice. So we did 2 different mindful self-compassion exercises. We talked about values. We noted our helpful and less helpful stress responses. So thinking about the different pieces, what is one thing you're willing to one thing you'll take away and willing to put into practice? We know for committed actions, it's helpful to list out pretty specifically what you will do, when you will do it, where you will do it, and also from a values perspective, why you will do it, why this matters to you. So in this, it talks about I want to use kind hands, so either the first or second exercise. Next time I have a desire to argue with my partner, I will soothe my nervous system prior to discussing my frustrations with them, allowing me to be more present and show up as a kinder partner. Another example might be I'll speak kinder to myself. I'll talk to myself more like a friend. Instead of drinking alcohol, I'll take a walk and deep breathe. Remind myself everyone makes mistakes. Everyone feels this way sometimes. It'll be okay. So some of that reassurance. You might want a more specific plan in general about those or more responses. Maybe I'll meditate 2 times a day upon waking. I'll do this because it helps me start my day. There's your why, and increases my ability to tolerate stress. You have the win upon waking, where you could even say, I'll do this sitting at the end of my bed. Okay. So here's the resource list. So looking at that, the mindful self-compassion, there's a value sort down here. The Meeting Point Counseling has a value sort. If you type in value sort, you can do a values exercise there. Brene Brown has a great link here about living into our values. You can always check that out. Russ Harris, who does some of the acceptance commitment therapy trainings, has that. Here's the articles I mentioned on stress management. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this. Take care.